Welcome back to our next session. In this session, we're going to review why boundaries are so important. We're going to look at and focus on what you're protecting so you can create healthier boundaries in relationships and then begin building boundaries with consequences. We're going to look at all those things in the next couple of sessions, actually. Now, one of the things I want to remind you again, and this is part of your assignment you did last time, is that shame is always an enemy. However, shame, and the reason why shame is such an enemy is that it always comes with a negative story about us. And it's always almost to our death. And so it's like, remember that when shame comes over you, you're going to run with a story. In the lower part of your brain, it's going to run with a story. It's negative. And that negative story oftentimes is one of the biggest obstacles that we face in setting boundaries with consequences. Now, when that happens and shame runs off of that, it doesn't take but just nanoseconds for our brain to cause us to go down that rabbit hole. Shame now takes over, and the old messages from the past come back. It's like we're now suddenly 6 years old or 8 years old, 10 years old, and we're beginning to believe that I'm stupid or I'm unlovable or I'm weak or I'm not enough. You know, and we're going to be abandoned. Now, what you think really matters. It's like, your thoughts reap actions. Your actions will reap habits. Your habits will reap a character, and your character reaps a destiny. It does yesterday, does today, it will tomorrow. Now, at some point, you are where your own best thinking got you. Now, like I said earlier, I got to that point and I realized, and this sucks, man. This is really bad. That I suddenly have found myself in a place in life, and I got myself here. This was my doing. Now, and I told you this earlier. It's like, yeah, I mean, it's like I woke up one day and said, "Wow, this is really bad news," and it's like it's me. I'm to blame. And it dawned on me right after that, though. Yeah, but if I chose myself here because of my thinking, then I could choose myself somewhere else with different thinking. So there's a safe place. And that's where God began to teach me over and over through my meditating and journaling, is that I go to my safe place. Tell me, Papa, what's the truth about me? Is the story in my head true, or what's the truth? Remind me again what you've said. And I began to hear from them. Go back to your journal. I went back to my journal over and over and over and remembered the things that he wrote me. And it began to change what I believed. It began to change my thinking, my belief structure, my character, my choices, and my life. Bottom line, God speaks truth about us when we listen to what he has to say. When he speaks truth, we begin to believe differently and think differently about ourselves and life. We begin to see different, and we begin to then choose and act differently. And then once we begin to do that often enough, our life, our destiny, the outcome is very different than where you are right now. Where does it all begin? It begins with you embracing and believing truth. How do you get that? You may not get it in your environment. You got to go vertical. You got to check in with God and say, God, remind me what you said about me. Remind me that I'm likable. Remind me that I'm enough. Remind me that I'm not weak, but I can do. I'm capable. I'm lovable. I'm wantable. As you begin to believe that over time, it takes time. This is no magic in this. God's not going to zap you. You have to begin to change and transform by renewing your mind. That's your job. To rewrite the neural network in your brain. That's your job. Now, as you go to your safe place, your assignment in this process is this: go to your safe place, and I want you to take each negative story you wrote down, and ask God what's true about you. Go ahead and do it. Leave some space. Write in your journal, this is my negative story, all the way out to the end. And then you sit down in your safe place, go to Papa, and say, what's the truth? And listen. Be quiet, be still, and know that he is God. Cease striving and know that he is God. You're striving. Now write down what you hear. Now, it may be some today, some tomorrow, some next week. Don't stop. This is a daily lifestyle for you. As he continues over time to correct your belief. I want to stop here and just remind you of something. There were a number of times in the New Testament and the stories that we hear and we read there about how the disciples were doing something. They were trucking around Israel somewhere, and oftentimes they found themselves in the Sea of Galilee a lot, seems like. And they were fishermen, so I guess that would make sense. And they're out there in the middle of this sea, ocean, type big in the inner sea, ocean. And a storm comes up. Jesus is laying down taking a power nap. They get frightened. They're soaking wet. The boat's filling out with water. They think they're going to drown, and they say, wake up, Jesus, wake up, Jesus. They wake him up in a panic. We're drowning. Help us. Jesus stands up and quiets the storm. Now, he turns around and he says something really odd. He asks him, he says, why don't you believe? Now you think, oh, well, they did. They asked him to stop the storm. They believed in him. I don't think that's what Jesus was challenging them about. I think he was challenging and says, I've told you what's true about you. You need to learn to believe it. There's several instances through the New Testament story where Jesus was walking with them in some experience or some deal, and they panicked and came to him for help because they didn't think, they felt weak. They felt incompetent. They felt like not enough. I don't know, whatever it was. But it was never about them not believing Jesus. It was about them believing what he said about him. Just think about that. As you write down this stuff, take these negative stories and write down what's true about you in your journal. Now, this is the end of our session. You got some work to do. I strongly encourage you to sit down, spend time on these stories. Think them through. Where do they go? You may have 4, 5, 6, I don't know, negative stories that you run with in your head. Some might involve your children. Some might involve your spouse. Some might involve your boss. Whatever it is, take those and then follow them all the way out to the end conclusion. And then ask God what's true about you. Trust what's going on in here. Trust what you're hearing from your higher power, hearing from God. And journal this. These are gems for the future. As you look back and remind yourself over time what is true. When you want to remind yourself, when you're feeling particularly crazy someday about something that's going on in your universe, and the temptation to go down the rabbit hole is right there, and you say, I need to remind myself, and you'll pull out this journal you've been working on, and you'll reread it, and you'll say, yes, this is truth, and I'll stand on it. Do your work. I'll see you in the next session. We've got some hard work coming up. This next session is going to be a real tough one, so I encourage you, get this groundwork done before we start into the next one. I'll see you in the next session.